These NBA bums were shockingly nothing less than legends in their high school careers, starting with Patrick Beverley, whose game was nothing like what we know him for now. Pat Bev is known by some as a defensive player and is known by others as a dirty player, but back in the day, this guy was known as an unguardable player. Beverly rose quickly into the national spotlight after putting up season averages that just might melt your brain. With 37.3 points a game, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and 8 steals, Pat Bev was an absolute beast in high school. As you expect, he was absolutely hounding guards in the full court press, ripping a crazy 8 steals a game, but the way this guy was giving out buckets was unheard of. This guy was as fast as they came, burning to the basket, finishing layups like Kyrie Irving, and even dunking on people's heads. He was dancing on the perimeter, dropping ankles and hitting pull-up jumpers, and smacking deep threes in people's mouths. This was insane. Seeing Pat Bev destroy the Chicago basketball scene, which has some of the best talent in the country, cemented him as one of the best players that the nation had to offer on his way to a 31-2 record. But what cemented him as a high school legend was what happens when Pat Bev would match up against a man who was putting Chicago basketball on the map. Derrick Rose was not only the best player in Chicago, but was the best guard in the country at the time. Beverly may have had a cute little year putting up a 40 bomb on an overachieving team, but D Rose was putting up 25, 9, and 9 with 3 steals a game on a basketball powerhouse. I mean, this matchup looked like the Richmond Oilers vs. St. Francis, but I guess nobody told Pat Bev that this was supposed to be the best guard in the country. In Rose's own words, these guys got smacked, as Marshall would absolutely bury Simeon High School and Derrick Rose by 20 on their way to the state championship game, as Beverly would clearly win this point guard matchup, putting up 36 points in comparison to D Rose's 19. Clearly, since the beginning, Beverly's been a nightmare matchup for any guard. I mean, I wouldn't want to get 40 dropped on my head as he embarrasses me for 4 quarters after Geometry 2 either, but I for damn sure wouldn't want to be getting cooked by Austin Rivers after a long day either. Austin Rivers is mostly known today as kind of a laughingstock. Before Bronny James, this guy was the Nepo baby who the world thought landed his spot in the NBA due to his dad being the man pulling the strings on the Los Angeles Clippers. What was different about Austin Rivers' come up was that unlike Bronny, Rivers earned every bit of this recognition. Don't believe me? Well, at one point in time, Rivers was sitting at the top of the Rivals Top 100 board ahead of guys like Bradley Beal and Anthony Davis. Yeah, at one point in time, Austin Rivers was the best prospect in the country. This is hard to believe if you saw his subpar NBA career, but if you were around for the glory days of the Hoop Mixtape era, you know exactly why this is.
Hey, listen.
Austin Rivers probably had the best one ever.
And that's what we was gonna say.
Yeah.
Like, what's the best mixtape that you remember? Austin might have had one of the best ones.
Austin Rivers certainly made a name for himself as a high school legend, garnering 4.6 million views with one of the most iconic thumbnails ever. I mean, this dude was just cold-blooded. He told us all he was gonna go off, and that he did. Rivers' game was just all-around jaw-dropping. This guy could explode to the basket or get there with a little finesse, then finish with his elbow above the rim, then cook you off the bounce and hit one of the nicest-looking pull-ups I've ever seen in my life. This guy's game looked to be an all-around offensive showcase. He was as athletic as they came, but being the son of Doc Rivers with the best trainers in the world molded him into what looked like a crafty playmaking combo guard. Austin Rivers was the player to watch, and no one was coming for his throne. While playing against some of the best competition in the country, Rivers was able to carry his high school to their first state championships in back-to-back years, while putting up nearly 30 a game as a senior. Rivers certainly had the country on his back. Literally, carrying the FIBA under 18 to a gold medal and setting the scoring record with 35 in a game, and moving on to the School of Schools in Duke University to continue his dominance. Of course, this would mark the immediate fall of Austin Rivers, who up to this point was yet to play in a system that wasn't based around him doing what he wants. This was a system that was great for the highlight reel, but abysmal for his future in basketball, as Rivers would put up an inefficient 15 a game for the Blue Devils with more turnovers than assists. Rivers certainly was a talented scorer in high school, and man, those days were fun, but when it came to crank up the intensity, Rivers didn't have what it looked like to make it at the next level. But at least he wasn't cheating the system like Shabazz Muhammad. Shabazz was pretty much just the draft bust in the NBA that rode the bench on the Wolves before Wiggins and Levine would take his spot on the team. Really, Shabazz is remembered for not much more than getting caught lying about his age in the NBA, which probably helped him even get that far in the first place. But as a 20-year-old senior, Shabazz was once referred to as a once-in-a-generation level talent. He was an athletic freak for Bishop Gorman as a 6'6" wing. This kid was unguardable as by his junior year he was the best player in Nevada, and by his senior year, this kid was ranked the #1 player in the country. It was no wonder why either. I mean, when the world got to watch him dominate the slam dunk contest while jumping over dudes and catching lobs off the glass, it was pretty easy to see why he was better than the rest of his class. With a really solid base that he was exploding off of, a pretty polished post bag, and a really quick and nice looking lefty jump shot, it really looked like this guy had the ability to put up major points in a hurry, with his motor that was top of the line. Really, with what we had available at the time, it was no surprise that Greg Anthony was calling him a once-in-a-generation talent, because he was far from the only one that was saying that. But alas, Shabazz really did just have us all tricked the whole time. Despite being quite the athlete with quite the motor, these high school mixes and highlight reel dunks just fooled us all. Shabazz was good enough to put up solid totals in college, so in the grand scheme of things, he was a pretty good player comparatively to high school players. But when he got to the NBA, it was a rude awakening. The Timberwolves put a lot of eggs in this guy's basket, giving him the freedom to do as he pleased on some miserable Wolves teams. But very soon it became clear that this guy was not on the NBA level. Shabazz was a total black hole offensively, and although when he got to the basket he was a good finisher, Shabazz would put his head down, charge forward with his left hand only, and shuck up bricks as he was double teamed. I mean, outside of just charging to the rim, this guy really couldn't do too much. He was a super inconsistent shooter, he was a miserable defender, and he was not willing to pass the rock at all. As it came out in 2013 that this guy had been lying about his age this whole time and was playing in high school as a senior at 20 years old, it really made more sense why this physically overdeveloped high school kid was skillfully underdeveloped in the NBA. But after stacking his millions and finessing us all, I guess all you could do is tip the cap to him, and hey, at least we got a few sweet mixtapes out of it. The Takeover. Sebastian Telfair and LeBron James are about to rule the world. Imagine that. As one of these stars would go on to change the game of basketball as we know, the other would flop royally in the NBA before being sentenced to prison. Yeah, Sebastian Telfair was certainly not all that we hoped in the NBA, but holy hell did Telfair have one crazy ride to get there. To do his story justice, you really have to go back to his roots, because this thing was insane from the jump. Telfair grew up in a dangerous area in the projects of Brooklyn, New York. He had an abnormal drive as a kid, having seen his older cousin Stephon Marbury, who lived in a unit above him, take his family out of the projects and into the hills through basketball. And from 6 years on, this kid put his head down until he reached the top, dominating on an 11-under team at just 6 years old. Telfair essentially did everything possible since elementary school with the goal of playing in the NBA. With brothers who would force him to play until he cried and not let him get any ink on his skin to avoid risking ruining his image, this was a bit excessive for a kid who hadn't played a high school game. But everything would pay off, and pay off big time. Telfair's hype was widely growing, and after being invited to the Adidas ABCD camp for high school seniors as an 8th grader, the world quickly realized that Telfair was gonna be a star. His name spread like wildfire in NYC. Words really don't do this thing justice. At a time before Twitter or Instagram, this guy was a household name just off of word of mouth alone. I mean, this dude was really one of the original high school basketball celebrities. He had dudes like Jay-Z and Derek Jeter pulling up in the front row to watch high school basketball games. There was an aura of mystery and uniqueness about this guy's game, bringing a community together that you just couldn't recreate in this time. After putting his school on the map and carrying them to a state championship his junior season, the New York City legend of Telfair would grow crazier and crazier. Everyone knew Telfair and everyone knew Marbury, but when a 17-year-old Telfair would challenge a 25-year-old Marbury to a one-on-one game, this was something that the whole neighborhood had to see. With a whole block jammed on a court in the projects, everyone in the city would be shocked to see Telfair bust the ass of an NBA All-Star while in high school. Telfair would be invited to a Jay-Z sponsored pro game at Rucker Park, where even among guys like Jay Crossover, Richard Jefferson, and Kenyon Martin, this guy still stood out despite his age. Telfair would go on to score over 33 a game in his senior year with just under 10 assists, in front of sold-out crowds with fans packing the parking lot waiting for autographs. Telfair's mix of insane speed, ball handling, and vision made him the most Showtime guard in the country. With the world in his hands, Telfair had the freedom to do with it as he pleased. and in this situation decided that learning and developing at the University of Louisville would be the next step on his path, since despite his ceiling and the hype surrounding him, there were a few major holes in his game. Standing at just 6 feet tall, Telfair was disadvantaged when attacking the rim and defending the ball, but with insane speed and athleticism for a high schooler, it didn't exactly matter. There is of course some similar small guards that find some success in the NBA despite their size, but there really isn't too many that shoot the ball as poorly as this guy. It needed to be developed badly. After committing to college, this plan would take an immediate left turn, as a murder would take place just doors down from his family's apartment unit, and with the goal of taking his family out of the projects, Telfair would cash in, declaring for the NBA draft at a high school and landing an 8-figure deal with Adidas. Telfair did achieve his goal, and he put on a movie in the process, but really, due to the issues we covered earlier, he really wasn't a great NBA player at any point, and after landing his first payday, in his words, he just wasn't hungry anymore. Telfair would also struggle with leaving his past in the past, as he would be charged with illegal firearm possession 3 separate times, the third of which would land him in prison, as well as being charged in the health and welfare plan that just landed Big Baby Davis in prison. The downfall of Telfair was certainly an unfortunate tale, and a real reality check for the man who seemed to once have it all. But hey, at least he left us one crazy story in the meantime. Michael Beasley is a name that's mostly known for getting baked off the courts and getting cooked on the court. But in high school, Beasley was an all-out legend. So for starters, let me just say that Michael Beasley on this Oak Hill squad were comically good. Like, these guys were too stacked for the sake of some of these bench guys' careers. So with Ty Lawson starting, who was the number 7 player in the 06 class, Brandon Jennings, who was the top player in the 08 class, coming off the bench because Lawson was a bit older, KD, who was the number 1 player in the 06 class, and Michael Beasley, who was the number 1 player in the 07 class, as well as Nolan Smith, who would go on to play for Duke and get drafted into the NBA in the first round, with 6 D1 players filling out the remaining spots on the bench. The show got on a roll at Oak Hill, as it always does. But even at that, Beasley was a massive standout from his earliest stage. See, Kevin Durant and Michael Beasley were basically best friends since they were young. And despite being a year older than Beasley, KD himself would admit that during their younger years, Beasley was an even better player than him. KD also states that Beasley was the guy packing the van to play with anyone, anywhere. He was far more outgoing than Durant and found himself playing better competition, while KD would train by himself. So for that reason, Beasley's game developed light years faster than everyone else. Everything just seemed to come so easily for him. I mean, if you think a 6'10 wing who can torch deep threes and create shots better than basically anyone ever would dominate the high school level, you'd be right. But wait until you saw Michael Beasley. Smush Parker even labeled Beasley as LeBron-like, but in his own way, he was kind of more well-rounded than LeBron. Obviously, he didn't have quite the talent level of LeBron in high school, but Beasley was literally built to dominate the high school game. A big part of Beasley's flop in the NBA had to do with his tweener size. At 6'9" and more athletic than most bigs, but not really strong enough to hang in with them, and way more physical than most wings, but not exactly the ball handler or passer, Beasley never really found his role and didn't develop his frame or skill set to find it either. But in high school, he could play every role. Beasley could basically do everything. He could beat shots into the stand, take the ball in transition himself and dunk on your head, take you off the bounce in isolation and pull up over you, all while grabbing like 87 rebounds a game. Beasley was really a more physical version of Kevin Durant, and back in the day, Durant never had the hype that Beasley had either. Despite the stacked roster, Beasley was the number 1 option his senior year on Oak Hill Academy, averaging 28 points, 16 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 4.5 blocks per game, before averaging highs of 13.8 and 8.3 rebounds on the FIBA Under-18 team, and winning McDonald's All-American Game MVP with a crazy 23 points and 12 rebounds against the best players in the country. Even amongst the best competition, Beasley was still ridiculous dominant, which transferred to the college level before never really getting his foot set in the NBA. He may have a pretty brutal reputation nowadays due to his own actions self-sabotaging his career, but one thing you can't take away from him is his status as a high school basketball legend. DeJuan Wagner was not just a high school star. He was a basketball phenomenon. At Camden High School in New Jersey, he became an instant legend, lighting up courts across the country. As a freshman, Wagner was already averaging 25 points per game, but by his senior year, he had taken his game to a whole nother level, putting up an insane 42.5 points per game. His scoring ability was nothing short of ridiculous. He could shoot it from deep, he could drive past defenders, and finish at a rim with a smoothness that made it seem like he was playing on a different level than everybody else. The most iconic moment of his high school career, and maybe one of the most iconic moments in high school history, came when he scored 100 points in a single game, cementing his place as one of the most legendary players in high school basketball history. That performance was a statement, proving he could dominate at any level. Scouts and analysts were already calling him the best high school player in the country. Comparisons to Allen Iverson and Stephon Marbury were inevitable, and many predicted that Wagner would become the next great NBA point guard. His rise was meteoric, and as the #1 high school recruit in the country, he had the whole basketball world watching his every move. It wasn't long before he committed to Memphis under coach John Calipari, where he would only play one season before declaring for the NBA draft. And in this single season, Wagner averaged 21.2 points with 3.8 assists per game, showcasing the talents that made him a high school legend. He had everything: speed, skill, and an unmatched ability to score. The hype was real, and his NBA future did seem bright at this time. In 2002, Wagner would be drafted 6th overall by the Cleveland Cavaliers. However, it wasn't too long before injuries started to derail his career. In his second season with the Cavs, Wagner began to experience health issues that would ultimately define his NBA tenure. He was diagnosed with a painful digestive system disease that forced him to miss significant time on the floor and undergo multiple surgeries. He even had to have a portion of his colon removed, putting his future in serious jeopardy. His health began to spiral downward, and he was never able to regain the explosive form he once had. By the time he was 26, Wagner's NBA career was over. He was traded from the Cavs to the Warriors and then to the Bulls, but his performance continued to decline. His body simply couldn't withstand the NBA grind. After only 4 seasons in the league, his once promising career ended in 2006. Wagner's a bit of a forgotten tale in the NBA, but that doesn't discredit that this was the craziest scoring run in high school basketball history. As LeBron James graced the cover of Sports Illustrated with the entire sports world in the palm of his hand, there was another phenom quietly rising, preparing to take the game by storm, a 7th grade O.J. Mayo. Already drawing comparisons to the chosen one, Mayo was turning heads. Averaging 23 a game on the varsity team at Rose Hill Christian at just 13 years old, he offered a tantalizing preview of the remarkable things to come. The following year as an 8th grader, he upped his scoring average to 27 per game, setting the stage for what would be one of the most electrifying high school careers in basketball history. When Mayo transferred to North College Hill for his freshman year, it was clear he wasn't your average teenager. On his first day of school, local journalists and television crews lined up, eager for a glimpse of the phenom. At just 15 years old, O.J. Mayo was already a celebrity. The hype reached new heights when 2 years after LeBron's infamous Sports Illustrated cover, Mayo was labeled the next one on his own magazine feature. Mayo's high school career was nothing short of legendary, averaging 29 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists while taking home 2 Mr. Basketball awards before even starting his senior season. His dominance was unquestionable. He led his team to 3 consecutive state championships and essentially took over the high school basketball world after LeBron entered the NBA. His fame grew so large that he set an attendance record of 16,202 people in a showdown against Oak Hill Academy, a moment that solidified his status as the best high school player in the country. O.J. Mayo was basketball's sure thing. Scouts and analysts raved about his potential, stating that he was the closest to a guaranteed NBA star as anyone could possibly be. His scoring was effortless. Whether driving to the basket, pulling up from the mid-range, knocking down threes, or working off screens, OJ could score any way he wanted to. His talent was undeniable. Despite still being in high school, Mayo's reputation earned him an invite to Michael Jordan's exclusive camp, which featured the top college players in the country. Though younger than everyone else, Mayo made it clear that he belonged, standing out as a shining star among future NBA players. Jordan himself took notice during a pickup game where he personally decided to guard Mayo, whose oozing confidence began heating up. Talking trash as he knocked down shot after shot, the gym erupted as OJ's confidence soared, pulling up from anywhere, determined to prove that he was the best player there. However, as anyone knows, trash-talking Michael Jordan never ends well. Jordan, irritated, cleared the gym and proceeded to give Mayo a legendary one-on-one beatdown. It was a classic talk shit, get hit moment, etched in Mayo's memory forever. But the cocky arrogance Mayo displayed that day wasn't a one-time thing. It became a reoccurring theme in his life and career, leading him into trouble down the line. The issues didn't wait until later. They began during his high school days. Despite his prodigious talent, Mayo struggled with discipline. He was involved in incidents like assaulting a referee and facing drug possession charges. Although these issues were overlooked due to his status as the top player in the country, they revealed a troubling pattern. Mayo's high school career ended in a fitting fashion, with an audacious signature move and off-the-backboard lob to himself to seal yet another state championship. It was the perfect summation of the high school legend that was OJ Mayo. Flashy, dominant, and seemingly unstoppable. OJ would go on to play at USC, where with the heightened competition, OJ wasn't the next one necessarily, but was certainly good enough to be a top pick in the NBA draft, primarily due to his role as a go-to shot creator and go-to shot maker. Mayo would burst onto the NBA scene, averaging 18.5 as a rookie and finishing second in Rookie of the Year voting. But after a solid sophomore year with similar numbers, he stagnated hard. While the Grizzlies improved, it was more due to players like Marc Gasol and Zebo. Mayo's impact wasn't exactly translating into wins, and his career peaked very early. By his third season, Mayo was moved to the bench. Frustrations mounted as he clashed with teammates like Tony Allen and was suspended 10 games for a steroid violation. Off the court, his life spiraled, partying, chasing women, and neglecting his development. He relied on his shooting, but lacked elite athleticism and defense, really limiting his growth all around. After an underwhelming stint in Dallas, where Rick Carlisle criticized his work ethic, Mayo signed a $24 million deal with Milwaukee, only to watch his game decline further and further. By 2016, he was suspended for 2 years for violating the NBA's anti-drug policy, ending his career altogether. Despite brief success in China, his NBA days were done, as the league distanced itself from his downfall. So much for the guy who's labeled as the next one. Thanks for watching if you made it this far, and I'll see you boys in the next one. Peace out.